we get experimental science. We're curious, non-judgmental.
Any guesses as to what this species might be? I know y'all had all the voting, but based now on seeing the image, do y'all have any guess as to what this might be? It does not look like a virus to me. It is in fact not a virus. It is not a virus. It is not an ant. It is not a fly. Nope. It is a master of mimicry. And not a bee, not a dino, nor a bird. It is, Smikes has gotten close, so these animals have mimicked ants in the past. Most species that we know of are ant mimics. But this one is quite different. Not an assassin bug either, Cliff. So one thing I want to point your attention to is this region right here. So that engorged region is called, I have it written down because I think it's very difficult for me to say, physogastry. So it is an enlargement of the abdomen. It is an enlargement of the abdomen, and it only happens after the insect has hatched. So during development, it has a totally normal abdomen size, and it's this region that just gets enlarged, and it's a master of mimicry. I don't know, once you hear what it's trying to mimic, it's very easy, I think, to see it. But at the time, when I first looked at it, I still had no idea what this was even trying to be. So this is, in fact, a beetle classification, and it is trying to mimic a totally different insect and sneaking on into this type of, I don't want to give away too much because I think it's fun to figure out what it is, and I know the word that I'll use might actually nail it down. So a bug, but Ubi, a bug is so broad. It is trying to mimic a termite, not a parasite. Well, here's the question, Cliff. It is not classically defined as a parasite. About 300 of these species, and they're called rove beetles. Rove beetles tend to change their body types, just like you're seeing here, to match with a particular species that they're trying to be taking into. Primarily ants, so that's why I was saying Smikes had a very close answer. The big heavy hitting thing is that it is from Australia, where we all know we have very unique animals that are coming in and out of Australia, so that is one distinctly neat feature of this animal that is in fact from Australia, and of course it looks terrifying. It is not toxic, it is not going to bite you, but this is the first example of a rove beetle that is trying to mimic a termite. The first time these animals were discovered was in 1973. Not this one particular, but just the rove beetle. There's a quote from the author saying that the existing knowledge of this is based solely on one other species that's closely related, that were collected from an old termite mound. So there had been two individuals of a different species in a termite mound that had been found, but they were not alive. So it was in a really, really old termite mound. They found these two things that didn't look like termites. They had this beetle-like posture, but they were already expired, right? So it was tough to get any real information out of it. Now they've found actual living samples again in Australia. They did some measurements with the old sample and this current one, and they suspect the two might be different species because of, not because of genetic sequence, but because of some of the measurements. They did do a full genome sequence. They just sequenced part of the genome. Physogastry is the process of what this is called, of this enlargement. And we don't know what it's from, Cliff, and it's not really mapped out of like how this all connects and where, you know, my naive, like where is the gut going and where does it poop from and like all the, I don't know. I don't know, Cliff. Looks like it might poop on it. Thank you, Cliff. Right? It looks like there's a little opening right here and it just poops on itself, which also would be fascinating. I don't mind either way that this goes. So that's the particular ant version of this beetle, but there's again now two termite versions. So again, you can see it has a similar approach where that abdomen is curved upward. Again, I don't know where this one poops from, but it's doing the same thing as trying to mimic the appearance, and then it also mimic the scent too. So Cliff, you said that they were parasitic. What's interesting is in the paper, there's no mention of them. Like the word parasitic isn't used, but it's the same behavior that you're seeing here. So that's why I was saying it's a little bit of a, seems like almost like a semantic argument where some people classify them as such and others don't. So pretty cool insects. Here's the paper. We can look at some of the figures. So yeah, they just described the animal. They have the female appearance of it. They have the length 2.5 millimeter curvature of the abdomen. And so it's, not too large of an animal. There's the tergite. They did sequencing of one of the mitochondrial genes. They say the mitoco1 gene, which is under evolutionary selection, and it's constantly evolving, so it's very differential between different organisms. And that's how they demonstrated that they probably think this is probably a different thing. And then again, they just did some imaging and did some comparisons between the animals.
So this is like new species compared to that one single instance.
In that single instance, they found 2 individuals, and they were just preserved in alcohol, so they didn't have necessarily like they didn't do any genetic information off that one.
Okay, so it's a new species then compared to what?
To the other relatives of this beetle. They classified them close to other rove beetles, like it's still in the same group.
Okay.
And they're pretty closely related. It's just they're specialized on termites instead of specializing on ants. And again, then they did some comparisons here of the termites from which they came, like the nest, and you can see kind of, for them it's not an enlarged abdominal structure, but it's just a big abdomen and what it looks like, and maybe how these animals are able to blend in via mimicry. So yeah, it was just a neat new study. No fancy pants stuff like that, but there's a little bit of sequencing involved. They did some measurements. The big tell and the easiest thing for them was that it wasn't in an ant colony, because that would have been, I think, much harder to prove that it was something different, because most of these animals, or the rove beetles, are found in ant colonies, and then they, I think, maybe would have had to do a little bit more sequencing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know that it would have necessarily been more difficult, but yeah, you would have needed more molecular markers to convince, I think, most of us.
Yeah, but given where
skeptics and.
But given where it was found, I think it was a pretty straightforward shot to it.
How many beetles are known to specialize on termites? Like, are these the first instances, or are there other species that have been described as termite mimics?
Based on how the paper is written, this is the second instance. And they were also adamant about that they suspect that there are more in Australia where they found them. And the reason they're suspecting of that is just because, I guess, the numbers game. How many species of beetle there are, how many different termites also exist in Australia, how much they've been able to survey.
Social colonies are just perfect for parasitic, invasion. I mean, they're designed to be cooperative, so you imagine how easy it would be and how tempting it would be for an organism to take advantage of that. And so I'm just surprised that these are the first instances of that.
I think it's just they haven't looked.
Just nobody cares.
Because it's the same thing with leafcutter ants, right? The one that we found on stream was the first instance described, and it's just, it was an accident that they ended up finding. So of termites, that looks weird.
Yeah. Or you just assume that it's like some kind of, it's mutations happen, and you just keep moving.
Or it got injured in development or something, exactly. And that's why it looked. Because if you look from the side view, sure, that's definitely not a termite. Yeah. But this overhead view, which is probably how you'd see it, I don't know. I think it looks pretty. If thousands in there, I wouldn't stick out to me.
I gotcha.
So I think maybe it's just one of those that people just haven't bothered looking yet. Wide array of these again, 275 species that they've identified so far that do this. And again, if you're talking 250,000 species of beetle, you're probably hilariously underestimating that number. The data on the beetle side with the ants is cool. Yeah. They're able to have this blending in. They didn't have anything in this paper in terms of what the mechanism is for the animals blending in. So, is it, presumably it's smell of some kind similar to the rover beetle with the ants, but there was no real evidence provided. But I thought it was cool because this is a really neat piece of biology in terms of mimicry.
It is cool piece of biology, and the paper gave us insight into the nature of evolution.
It's super basic, but again, it's a neat insect, so I thought it would be a fun one to do.